Welcome to the Honest Pod. I am so excited that we are in a series right now on living a life that is free and fully alive and unpacking like what does that actually mean? I feel like for like my whole life, I heard in church, God wants you to be free and he wants to have an abundant life. And I literally had no clue. Like I was like, what does that even mean? And I tried to do it, but I just failed miserably because I didn't really know what it meant. And so we're doing a series this month on what does it mean to live free and fully alive. And I got to bring on one of my dearest friends.
Hot Lana, I just want to say right now to everyone that's listening and or watching, get your freaking big girl pants on because it is about to go down. We have so much history. So it's not even about to be cute. We're about to go real deep, real fast. Big girl pants. Let's go.
That's right. We waste no time.
None.
I got to meet Tony years ago now at a Leading and Loving It conference,
Yeah.
and we became fast friends and just really enjoyed your
Mm,
energy, Tony, and just really enjoyed the desire you had. Well, here's
mm,
what I love most about you. I
mm.
love that we can be crazy, laugh, and the next breath cry because we are in the trenches of each other's heart, deep work, feeling it all. And we will do that roller coaster dance for a straight hour, 2 hours, 3 days, right?
It's so real. But it's the most freeing though. I leave my conversations with you like, whew, I am gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be fine. Everything's
Yes,
gonna be good. And you need people like that in your life. Let me just say that.
we do. And when I was thinking about this, the context of free and fully alive, I have said this before, but there was like 4 or 5 people that I wanted to have on this podcast to come on and talk about this. And I had specific areas that I was like, this person needs to talk about this. And here's one of the pillars that we talk about in my new book coming out,
Mm,
Free and Fully Alive, is the pillar around connection to self.
yeah.
And I think growing up in the church, now I know that there was Tony before church, and
Mm-hmm.
there was Tony in crazy church, and
Mm-hmm.
then there was Tony on a journey to like freedom in like her life, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was thinking about this idea around connection to self, for me,
Mm,
growing up in the church, I don't think I had the concept that I needed to even connect to myself. I mean, it was like
right.
just trust God, just go to God,
Yep.
you just need God, and that's where you start. And we kind of bypass this whole idea of connecting to self. And I would love to
Yeah.
hear from you. What was, a little bit of that journey for you
Oh yeah.
to really, because I saw you go from, like you say, working in the club to then like preaching on a stage, right?
Yeah.
In a
Yeah.
matter of like months.
Yeah.
That was like, okay, connect, just you moved from crazy to connection to God,
Yeah.
and there was a big deficit. So tell me a little bit about that uncovering of, wait a minute, this isn't actually working the
Yeah.
way I think it's supposed to work.
Yeah, the language that I started to put around it is that I was a fan of God, not a follower of God. And
Mm-hmm.
fans, we can call ourselves Christians. We roll up into church on Sunday, belting out all the worship songs. I was such
Mm-hmm.
like a praise and worship leader from the front row, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And but there's no real surrender, which is one of the qualifications of a follower, right? And for me personally, there wasn't a lot of surrender to God because I really didn't trust him. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't trust God because I said, if all of the people that were supposed to be there for me didn't protect me, didn't keep me safe, well, obviously God is like that as well. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started to get into counseling and started to heal and really uncover some of the lies and my own personal needs that weren't met as a little girl, I realized that there were parts of me that didn't feel safe and protected, not just because I had a really horrible traumatic past, but because I wasn't ready to trust again. I hadn't released
Mm-hmm.
myself to open my heart up to people again, trusting that they would be who they say they were, and they would treat me how I really deserved to be treated. And I felt the same way about God. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until I deeply connected with little Tony, 8-year-old
Mm-hmm.
Tony, who was sexually manipulated and fondled with by family members, and 13-year-old Tony, who lost her virginity in her bedroom to this much older guy while her parents were
Mm-hmm.
away. Like, it wasn't
Right.
until I did that, I connected deeply to myself and acknowledged some of my needs, just like you talk about in the book, that I was even available to trust God, right?
Ooh, so good. Yes.
And and so it's been a beautiful journey, but that is really what I had to do first to
Mhm.
even go deep, like for real with God and really be a
Mhm.
follower of him.
So this brings up a question. You
Yeah.
said that I was a fan of God and yet I didn't really trust God. Now, I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I wonder if that wasn't like a conscious, you weren't literally saying out loud, well, I don't trust God. I'm just going to follow him. So how do you, looking back, like, how do you know when, when I'm a fan and yet there are
Yep.
parts of me that are actually neurologically, because you're speaking about a lot of, neurological responses
Yep.
to going, I actually wasn't trusting God, but I wasn't really trusting God. How did you know that?
Oh, I knew it because my whole life looked funky and ratchet, and I was pretending on Sunday, right? Like I would walk into
Mhm.
church on Sunday, I was on staff, youth pastor, worshiping like nobody's business, and I could not wait to get home on Sunday night so I can roll up a blunt and get high and numb all my pain.
Mhm.
I didn't trust God with that pain. And so I replaced him with idols. So that was a
Mhm.
telltale sign that
Right.
I had idols and things that I was using to numb because I didn't trust him just yet. I also
Mhm.
was in a really like abusive marriage, very verbally abusive, doors ripped off the hinges, holes punched in the walls. I was there because I didn't feel like I was worthy enough for kind words, for not getting cursed out, yelled at, being afraid. I didn't believe that about myself. But let me tell you, baby, I would be posting on Instagram, waltzing around the church, giving other people marriage advice. Such a freaking hypocrite. Oh my gosh. Like, it's crazy. But really, I could tell because I was living a double life.
Mhm.
Everything looked
Right.
shiny on the outside, and it was
Mhm.
completely broken, shattered, ratchet, and dirty on
Mhm.
the inside,
Mhm.
for real. So, yeah.
Did you want to, like, in those days,
Yeah.
were you like fake following Jesus, or did you really want to follow Jesus?
Mm,
Maybe you just didn't know. Yeah, like, I like, help me unpack that a little bit, because
yeah.
I mean, were you really just trying to be fake about Jesus, like, or was there parts of you that was real about that?
Yeah. Here's what's interesting, and you know this about like trauma and about, living in really unhealthy environments. Like, I don't think any of us wants it. I think we really
Right.
do want goodness. I think we really do
Right.
crave freedom. But
Yes.
shame has come in and it has made us embarrassed and it's made us hide. And oftentimes, I mean, as you know, like hiding is the kryptonite to healing. Like when
Hmm.
you start hiding, like so many weird things happens in the dark. Like when
Right.
there's no light, there's so many weird things happens in the dark. And I think that I desperately wanted a good life. It's honestly one of the reasons why I left the marriage, why I left the church, because I couldn't contain it anymore, right? I started leaking. And unfortunately, I had a daughter in that really toxic marriage, and she gave me the courage to leave. But I deeply wanted it, and when I found a way out, I took it. I really, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't want to live like this. Like this isn't what I've
Right.
been destined to be and how I've been destined to be treated. So yeah, there were parts of me that was like, oh God, I really don't want to fake it. I want to love God.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Tell me about the day you accepted Jesus. What was that day like?
Yeah, I joined this church. I was 21. And I didn't get saved at the little youth camp like everybody else. Okay, it took me a while. Okay, I was 21. I'd gone to this church, and I was probably a little bit high. And it was this worship night, and they called an altar call, and I go up to the altar, and I closed my eyes, and it was almost as if the Lord started like flashing all of my like life in front of me. And again, my deepest
Mm-hmm.
lie, the thing that really stopped me from a deep relationship with God was that I'm unsafe and I'm unprotected. I've been through too much. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember like thinking about 8-year-old Tony and seeing myself in the closet with my cousins fondling me, sexually manipulating me. I saw myself
Wow.
at 10 and 11 putting the little pills into my mom's pill bottles, and I saw myself at 13 literally in my SpongeBob SquarePants freaking bedroom, and this older guy
Jesus.
came over with his
Mm.
friend who was sitting in the living room, didn't know what he was going to do, take my virginity in my bedroom. Like I saw
Mm.
myself getting high, getting drunk, going in and out of a freaking ditch with my car and being like, whoop, whoop, that was a close one. I literally
Mhm.
saw it and I just felt the spirit of the Lord like impress on me like I was there. I
Yeah.
wasn't responsible for all of this, but I was there protecting you. And when I
Right.
opened my eyes, first of all, I was weeping and I was like, "Yes, Jesus, I'm giving my life to you." But second, there was this little girl, somebody's random daughter, saw me weeping at the altar, and she was
Jesus.
literally holding me,
Mm.
holding me. It was like the Lord
Like,
himself had sent this little
mhm.
girl to come and
Mhm.
hold me. Didn't even know her at all. Her mom was like, "Come back." Um, but that was the day I
Mhm.
was like, "Hallelujah, yes to Jesus."
Mm.
But
Also, like,
yeah,
little Tony hugging you.
and
Like,
little Tony
you know, like, just
saying,
hugging
"We're
you,
okay."
and I love that he said, "I didn't do this, but I was with you," and also the invitation that you didn't do this either. Like, you were
Mm,
little. You were a little kid.
yeah,
So in this moment,
yeah,
you that was real. That was a real moment with you
yep,
and God, and we would call that in theology that you were justified in that moment. You are now
uh-huh,
covered by the blood. Your life
come on,
is changed. You are
come on,
now saved. Your name is written in the book of life. This moment
yeah,
happened. And he's
mm,
promising you ultimately in the future, when you, long, long
mm,
time from now, when you die and you go to see God, you're going to be glorified and your body's going to be made new.
yeah,
And this is what I'm getting at. I believe in that
mhm,
moment, right? Like you found freedom
yep,
to live a new way. But
mm,
this fully alive life
yeah,
was not something that came to you actually in that moment. Freedom came, an opportunity to go a different way
listen,
came to you. But the end
mm.
was what you've been talking about, right?
Yes. Listen, in your book, you literally say, once trauma is identified, a new path appears. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
path where God can give new meaning to that moment and then healing begins.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't acknowledge that we've been through trauma, that path is just going to be dormant.
Right.
Healing can't happen in that. And it's in that healing that the full access of God's power, I think personally,
Yes.
is revealed. And so, yeah, like 2 years of counseling every single week was amazing. But then the next step for me was EMDR, was trauma treatment, was acknowledging that I'd been through like real trauma, that it wasn't just
Mm-hmm.
this surface level thing, but that
Mm-hmm.
I had deeply been wounded and I had to tend to those parts of me
Yes.
and bring a, a professional counselor along for that. But then also, I mean, this is going to sound maybe controversial. I don't know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
It's,
not trying.
it's the honest thought. It's the honest
Okay,
thought.
great,
We're
great.
good.
No comparison here. But I just think that in the spirit of God coming after the one, okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with people that have stories like us, like
Mm-hmm.
we really, really need God.
Yes.
Like uh, like it's good. It has to be Him,
Mm-hmm.
and He has to be our source, and we have to have resources to keep us steady. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's for me, at least, it was not enough. Church wasn't enough.
Right.
I needed
Right.
like deep inner healing and I needed to bring the Lord along for that so that he
Mm-hmm.
could prove to be who he said and promised he was. And
Yes.
I'm not saying that, if you don't have trauma in your story, it's all good. Like, I'm not, but I'm saying, like, when you've been through some deep stuff, like, there is
Mm-hmm.
just something about who
Mm-hmm.
God can be when you deeply start to connect to yourself and understand where you've been wounded.
Yes, and that's not controversial. That's actually
Okay. Mhm.
biblical. And what's beautiful about what I hear you saying, and I'm going to push back for those that are listening, because I think it's really easy. I want you to hear and break down what Tony just said and what she's been saying. She accepted Jesus, and I want you to understand that was real for her.
Yeah.
That was a real moment in time where that
Mhm.
changed the trajectory of her life. It was as if the woman was caught in adultery, exposed in her nakedness, and now
Mm.
God said, go and sin no more. That wasn't a judgment call. That was now you have a new way. You have another
Uh-huh.
option. You don't have to live the way that you were living. You don't have to live the life. You have another way. So this begins the process then, and this is what I want you guys to understand, that it's not one and done. I came to know Jesus and now I'm just good. Now
Uh-huh.
the layers of what has been
Come on.
keeping you, and it's actually called sanctification. To live fully alive life is the process of sanctification to
That's
become,
good.
which is actually the word I am being saved. I'm in the process every day of being saved more and
Yep.
more and more.
Active.
So her
Mhm.
story is unraveling, and God is tending to the next layer and the next layer. Here's what I want to challenge everybody with, because people listen to my story, they listen to Tony's story, and they go, well, yeah, you really need a Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you need a lot of help. And here's what I want to say, and can I challenge you, friends, that it's, yes, we do need Jesus
Yep.
in the all the time desperate need. But however, so easy for us to point that out, just like the prodigal sitting in the pig looking the crazy life that he was living, coming up and like, okay, I am at the end, like I can't even feed myself at this point, right?
Right.
Like I need the Father. But
Yeah.
what about was out in the field, who lived a really good life? I ain't got no trauma. I'm not like my brother. I'm not living crazy like that. I don't
Uh-oh.
really need the Father that much, because look at all the goodness I've been doing. And I wonder if some of us that are listening are going, well, yeah, Tony needed all of this and she needed to connect to herself. I think it's harder for people who don't actually have this outward trauma, because we all have trauma in
Yeah.
our lives. I think it's hard. Wouldn't you? Don't you think it's harder
Oh,
for people to name that because of that self righteousness and pride?
oh, 100%. And the story that you mentioned in John 8 with the woman that committed adultery, like
Mm-hmm.
the greater sin in the room, the greater sin in the temple were the freaking Pharisees, the
Mm-hmm.
teachers of the law, who drug her behind out of a probably real compromising situation. She was probably
Right.
half naked with some fig leaves on, and drug her into the temple courts, and they literally could not see the grace and mercy of Jesus standing in front of them.
Mm-mm.
She stayed in her sin right there in that moment and got real freedom because she literally sat in condemnation. She sat
Yep.
so humbled, probably afraid. She was like, Lord, I'm about to die. I'm about to die.
I'm about to die.
I'm about to die.
Yep.
And she literally got to see the mercy of Jesus, the saving grace. I have the chills, and freedom of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what they all did? Left. They left
Mm-hmm.
because they felt so convicted about their own little sins that they probably committed all the way back. And they were like, okay, let me go ahead and head on out. And
Mm-hmm.
they missed the opportunity to be truly free in Christ, to hear Jesus say, hey, I don't condemn you. Go and leave your
Mm-hmm.
life of sin. All grace, all truth, all the time. They missed
Mm-hmm.
it because they was prideful and they thought they was all of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, here's the truth, is in that moment, I mean, we talk about like, you just need to be, I'm trying to be authentic. I'm going to live my authentic life. And I'm like, I mean,
Oh my,
okay, but
I'm over it.
authenticity is how much you control how authentic you want to be, but exposure, when you're naked
Transparency.
and exposed, you got no control. It is all bare naked, nothing. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
here. My life is before you. But it was
yeah.
in the exposure that
Mm.
changed the trajectory of her life, right? Where I was completely exposed. This man holds my life in his hands, and
Yeah,
I'm in need. But man, I think about just like what you brought up about those Pharisees holding that stone. And I think for many of us, we tend to draw, Tony,
yeah,
people out there that maybe have a crazy story. They're like, okay, God did this for Tony, God did this for Karrie, like we're gonna go.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think we might be in essence the minority when it comes to, like, not everybody been doing drugs, not everybody been doing crazy sex, doing all the stuff. But I think for a lot of us that are listening to this anyway, been going to church, they look right, they've been doing right, they
mhm,
had a quote unquote good family, and they're standing there with stones listening to this message, or
mm,
they're standing there like the brother going, I can't believe, God, that you would do this all for them, and why wouldn't you do this for me? And it's because they were justified by knowing Jesus, but they would choose not to be sanctified. Fully alive is the process of choosing sanctification, right? Like that, you would choose
ooh, that
that.
refining. Ooh,
You would
you
choose
gotta
that. And so
choose it.
you got to choose you, because,
Yeah,
again, connected to God in that moment, but came with a real need of, I'm a
yep,
mess. That was connected to self first.
yep.
And in the process of this, you justified. Now I'm starting to live kind of crazy in this church because I don't totally know how to do this. And I'm very wounded. I'm just wounded. We all are. What did that start to look like in going, okay, I've got God, but I'm not really bringing my whole self.
Oh,
I'm not really bringing my whole self.
well, y'all, we're gonna go a little deep because I think part of the real process of being connected to yourself is also being connected to your self worth. It took
Mm.
me a while to realize that I was worthy of good relationships, of a healthy church, of a pastor that wasn't crazy and manipulative, of a husband that didn't curse me out. Like,
Right.
when I started to deeply connect to myself and go to counseling, I started to transition out of those toxic environments. It was almost like it was
Mhm.
like an overflow of my connection. When I
Mhm.
transitioned out of this church and got a divorce and went to a healthy church, I almost found like a new God. Like, it was
Mhm.
weird. I was like, "Well, who is this kind God? I don't know who that is. I thought
Right.
he was this, I thought he was that, I thought he was that." And it really infiltrated my spiritual life, just being able to say, "I'm worthy of healthy environments and healthy relationships. I'm worthy of
Mhm.
sitting in a counseling office and being my most whole, full self." And then after that, after the trauma treatment, I really started to have a healthier marriage. And then I had this relationship with God where he was like, there were God winks is what I call them everywhere, where he
Yeah.
was showing up for me, and my relationships and my friendships, everything started to flourish after that. But it came with, I think, me choosing me first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I didn't tolerate so many things. I started to recognize red flags. I mean, it was just phenomenal, truly.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about, we talk about in my book, we talk about the process of grief leading to gratitude. Supernatural gratitude
Ooh,
comes in grief,
child.
right? Tell me a little bit about, because we're talking macro level here, like looking down, okay, I see that there's a problem, I'm moving forward. But those were some dark days, even after obviously following Jesus and walking out of this. I remember one of the stories you share about just being on the floor with the broken crayons, right? And just like, what's my life come to? That realization moves you into a season of really grieving what had happened to you. And I think there's a lot of fear in grieving. Could you tell me a little bit about that connection to self really is going to be coupled with sorrow?
If we're just gonna be 100%, which we should, because hello, honest pod, um, I'm still grieving, Carrie,
Yes. Yes. Yep.
because healing doesn't make you forget. It gives you
Come
more
on.
capacity to carry the pain.
Yes.
But the
Mhm.
reality still is, like, I still long for a better childhood than what I had.
Yes.
I still long deeply for my daughter not to had experienced what she did in my first
Yes.
marriage. Like,
Yes.
and there's a grief, there's this, it's almost like what, when the apostle Paul's like, there's this thorn in my side. There are days when
Mhm.
I'm just like, I don't want to be sad anymore. But then
Right.
I would have to
Right.
erase my full story. And I don't
Right.
want to do that.
Right.
Because grief, as you said, and you even said it on your Instagram the other day, like, grief does lead you to gratitude. Because
Mhm.
trust me, when you sitting up at the bottom of your staircase or in your closet curled up in a ball, and you're
Mhm.
like, Lord, why why is this happening? Like, I can't believe this, I can't believe that, I can't believe that. And
Mhm.
then you get the opportunity to wipe your tears, have someone come next to you and say it's gonna be all right.
Mhm.
Gratitude comes out for show
Yeah.
because you realize that God brought you through something.
Yeah.
He gave you a new name, he gave you a new identity, like, but that only happens once you acknowledge the grief, and that is
Right.
what it's been for me. It's been
Mhm.
saying, "I don't wanna cry." My counselor says, I literally run from grief. But
Mhm.
I remember just last week, well, again, we're just getting honest out here. Just last week, I was crying so hard on my counseling session. There was,
Yes.
like, 15 minutes where I was like, "I need to get my money back, sis. We didn't even talk about nothing. I just was crying." And I had been running from it, right? And then when you run from it,
Mhm.
it just, like, starts spilling out all over the place, and I'm just like, "I just don't understand." And my counselor finally, she was like, "Okay, let's get you back into your window of tolerance, sweet girl." And I settled down, and I said, "Oh, I really needed that.
Yes.
I really needed that grief."
Mhm.
Because I don't think it's just grief that we're afraid of, Carrie. I think it's
Mhm.
that we grieve alone, that we wouldn't
Mhm.
have anyone to say, "Okay, let's get you back into your window of tolerance."
Mhm.
And I think grief invites gratitude. I think it invites community. I think it invites grit. It invites
Mhm.
capacity. It helps us to withstand.
Mhm.
Um, and so I hate it, but I also love it.
Yeah, and I mean, and here's the truth. Paul talks about in Second Corinthians chapter 4. He
Ugh,
talks about, you know, this about we are clay jars
ugh,
housing the treasure, the glory of God. And he's like, and
mhm.
we are perplexed, but not in despair.
Not
We are
mm,
afflicted, but we are not crushed. And yet,
yes.
when we don't allow that the trueness of our humanity to be held in its complexity, then
Mm,
when we are afflicted, we are crushed. When we don't
mm.
allow that to be tended to in our
Ugh,
fragile body with the glory of God. And what I hear you saying is like, I love that you said, well, I'm still grieving. And I talk about this literally in the book that we are always going to be encountering grief because it was never supposed to be this way. We were
come
intended
on.
for Eden, right? We were
Listen,
intended
we
for
are
Eden.
cut from the same cloth. We are intended for Eden. We live under a freaking curse, period. Okay?
Yeah.
And until we get replanted in Eden, which I can't wait, honestly, because I just want to be naked, flopping around with my Savior, even though I don't know if we're going to be naked again. Anyways, yes. But that
Yes.
acceptance, right? Like, there's grief in that. And like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, while we're on this earth, like, we're living under a curse.
Mm-hmm.
In our
Mm-hmm.
bodies, in our minds, in our sweet little hearts, we were not intended. We were not created to carry the brunt and the weight of what we've been through on this
No,
earth.
no,
I'm
no.
like, why am I
And
crying? It's like because we're fragile.
we're fragile. And the beauty of that is, and this is what I want people to
Mm,
understand. This is what I think you model so well, is
ugh,
that a fully alive life is not severing a part of you so that
mhm.
you don't have to feel it. It's bringing all of it together. You and I both say this constantly. It is holding the grief and the gratitude in the same breath.
Come on,
Like
come on.
that is a fully alive life. And I think we've been so trained to either engage all the grief that he talks about this in Second Corinthians chapter 7, where he says the
Mm,
worldly grief will lead you to despair, but godly grief will lead you to hope. Paul says this. And so there
come on.
is there is a place for this, and a fully alive
Mm,
life. That process of
ugh,
sanctification is not eradicating
mm,
grief from your life. That's
come on.
craziness. It's actually going, I know that I can engage this. I will be afflicted, but I will not be
Mm.
crushed. I will be perplexed, confused, but I will not move to despair.
Yeah.
Bring that. I think that you have done that so well. Just
Yep.
as we're kind of wrapping up here a little bit, I would love for you to share. You know, the thing is that you and I have been blessed by the finances to be able to go to counseling. I thank
Yeah.
God for that. I mean, I think he knew,
Truly
like, okay, look it,
privileged.
yeah,
Okay.
you really are going to need help. So I'm gonna give you some money to be able to do that.
For real.
But
Yep.
there are most of our friends that are listening to this, our
Yep.
family, our friends out there, Tony, they can't afford
Yep.
counseling. And if
100%.
God was limited to us having to go to a counselor, what a limited God, right? And
We're
ideally that's great. That's great. We would love that. But what
yeah.
would you say to those, like, and we talk about this in the book, like that's why I wrote this book, is literally
Yeah.
because I'm like, I know that most of us can't afford counseling. So this is a how-to guide on
100%.
how to do this and how
Yep.
to walk in healing in your story, name the grief, name the story, work through the connection places in your
Yep.
life, connection to self, God, and others.
Yep.
How would you begin to offer some stuff to just in a tangible way?
Yep.
Because I mean, really, we could have written this book together. I mean, you
Well,
wrote
here's the
Brave
truth.
Enough
This is
to
what
Be
I was about to say.
Broken.
I was like, well, sis, we almost wrote the same books, okay? My book, Brave Enough to Be Broken, How to
Yes.
Embrace Pain and Discover Hope and Healing. Like, here's what I want to say that's a super controversial out there in the internet's world. There's been this wrestle of like licensed professional counselors, mental illness, and then pastoral people, lay people, and mental health. Like, what's the difference? How do we ride this line? Here's the deal: all of us want the same thing. And I think it's the same thing that Jesus wants from all of us. He wants us to be a holy people, for sure, pursuing Him, being sanctified daily, like doing our best to make the best decisions, and to not only speak like Him and sound like Him through our worship and the way that we can spit off scripture, but also to look like Him and act like Him and treat people like He does. And I think that latter part only comes when we dive into a life of wholeness and healing, of truly pursuing that. So we can be holy, whole, healing people. It's what I write in my book, write about the same thing in my book. Like, really tangible roadmap and steps to take. The things that I talk about specifically is transitioning toxic community. I just don't believe that you can heal in the place and with the people that broke you in the first place. Or dang it, it's gonna
Mhm.
be hard. They're gonna trigger
Mhm.
you. You're gonna pop off on them. You're gonna relapse. It's gonna be crazy. It's the same thing with drugs. Like there was a moment
Right.
when I literally could not be alone with my own brother, who I love so very much. But it was
Mhm.
because we was gonna do some drugs together. Dang it, okay, and I
Right.
wasn't strong
Right.
enough. And so I
Mhm.
talk about like really defining your circles. What does it look like to maybe just transition someone to an outer circle, to the sandwich
Mhm.
friend circle? That's the people that you just have
Mhm.
lunch with at your job. You don't tell them all
Mhm.
your business, okay?
Right.
Facebook is always on the outer circle as well. Stop
Yes.
Facebook.
In
Um,
Jesus' name.
right, and transitioning toxic community. Here's what I love so much that you talk about in your book that I talk about as well. Gratitude is life changing,
Yes.
down to the neuroscience of being grateful.
Yes.
Like maybe you don't have all the strategies yet. Maybe you haven't picked up Carrie's book yet, which you need to.
Mhm.
Get up every morning and thank God for something. Just in
Mhm.
anything. I don't know what it one time in the morning, one time in the nighttime. Lord, I thank
Mhm.
you for my toes. Because I think they
Yeah.
help with my balance or something like that. You know what I'm saying? If I didn't have my
Yep.
big toe, I'd probably be on the floor. Okay? Around a little bit, didn't mean for it to. Okay. God, thank you for my eyesight. If you have that ability, like, God,
Mhm.
thank you. What is it that you need to be grateful for? And
Yeah.
yeah, so I could go on and on. You know, we could literally just list it off for the people. But yes,
Right.
those are really good things. I mean, we can list books off, we can list podcasts off, all the things. I would
Mhm.
say if you need an on ramp, if you need to just start, free and fully alive. If you think
Mhm.
you started, but you're still struggling, free and fully alive. Okay. Like,
Mhm.
go
Right.
get the
Right.
book,
Right.
start somewhere, invest in this
Mhm.
stuff. Like,
Right.
oh,
Let me just say, look, I couldn't afford therapy for years. I mean, there
yeah.
was no
Yeah.
financial way. Are you even kidding me? But here's the beauty is that there is a lot of people out there, and me and Tony, I can
Yeah.
speak on behalf of Tony. I pull back the veil. I know Tony's heart when she's not
Yeah.
on a stage, when she's not on a podcast. I have sat with this woman. I have toured with this woman. I know
Mhm.
this woman's heart. I watched her do a group for a year with people that could barely afford to be on a membership. When I tell you that these books are not written just, we're not
No.
making a lot of money off this book. I'm telling you right now. This is not like, this is not how we're making our bread and butter. But we wrote these books,
Yeah.
helpful guide, because we've been there and we've been on the other side
Yeah.
and we were questioning the same things. And for $40, you could get two books.
Oh, yeah.
One, Brave Enough to Be Broken. Two, Free and Fully Alive, that are going to be coupled together and really help you for $40. What we have learned in therapy and what I've
Oh,
been
man.
doing for the past 30 years, what Tony's been doing for the past 10, 15 years, like working through these things
Yeah.
in a book form. And that is a good place to start. So when you say, I can't get to therapy, what can you do? What
Come
is out
on.
there? There are memberships out there that you can get a part of that are $40 a month. There are places you can go. Tony and I speak all over. That is
Yeah.
like, sometimes free, sometimes at $10,
Yeah. Go to the
whatever.
conference. Go to the
You can
church.
go to the conference, but there are things you can do. But
Yeah.
what we want to offer to you is, I didn't write this book, and I know Tony because I was there when she was writing her book. We did not. We were writing at the same time. We were crazy. It
Oh,
was a crazy season. We
it
were
was
touring.
great.
We were right. I don't even know how we're still alive, but here we are by the grace of God. But we wrote this book and we wrote these words down because we remember what it was like to not
Mm.
be able to afford a therapy, to go to church and not understand what the pastor was saying, to know we had this encounter with God, but we did not know how
Yep.
to start. Why am I not trusting God? Why do I love God
Yep.
and also don't trust him? What is
Yeah.
going on inside me?
Yep.
And we wrote these books for you. And so when I would say a next step, get that gratitude, get going. But for $40, my
Yeah.
1899 right
Yep.
now, on Amazon, to go,
Yep.
I can start here. I'm telling you right now,
Powerful.
I believe I've read Tony's book. Tony's read my book. I
Mhm.
believe that these books were written by
Powerful.
the grace of God, from our heart, from the depth of the pain in our story.
Oh,
And we don't write it.
oof.
We aren't trying to be like some theologian trying to make. We wanted to take complex things and simplify them in a way where you could begin the
Yeah,
journey now. Wouldn't you
right now. I mean, like,
say?
everyone asks, "Oh, what's your book about?" We could have easily written stories about ourselves, okay? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been
Mm-hmm.
easy. We preach about ourselves, we tell stories about our little crazy lives all the time.
Yep. Yep.
I don't wanna write a book like that. I
Me
wanted to
neither.
write a book, same with you, like, that was an actual roadmap because I didn't have one.
Right.
And it's crazy that people out there and don't know and they want it. And here's the you asked me this question earlier, Carrie, like, were you just wanting to be fake? No. I don't believe many of us do. We just don't know
Right.
how.
Right.
We don't know how. And I'm not letting another woman or man live their lives without the tools. And I think
Right.
that's why we wrote our books because it's like, we're not gonna do
Right.
this no more. Give them
Yeah.
something,
No. Yeah.
okay?
Yeah,
So yeah.
we say it all the time. I think when you've been healed by God, and we are in the process of healing, we are
Oh,
being saved, just like Paul,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
something begins to rise up inside you. We call it my hell no. Not on my watch will I
Woo!
continue to let this happen. And I think for me, free and fully alive is part of my hell no. My hell no that no woman, no man, because this is written for men or women, would encounter, would live a life where they didn't know how. And I think you're doing
Mm.
the same. And I'm just so
Yeah.
thankful for you. I'm so thankful for you.
Yay.
Guys, you can go and get Free and Fully Alive right now on Amazon. If you get it right now, I have all these, you know how pre-orders are. Okay. I never knew. I never knew pre-order
Get
was
them
like, it was a
right now.
thing.
Okay.
It really does. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
get the word out there. It's a big deal. I have more books I want to write. That pre-order
Yep.
helps me get those more books that I can write.
Yep.
And so I encourage you. I have some bonuses. I've got some videos that you get with that, a special podcast for that. Go and pre-order Free and Fully Alive. And while you're at it, put in cart Brave Enough to Be Broken by Tony Collier. I really
Mm.
believe, and I'm saying this in all honesty, these two books put together,
Oh,
I
man.
think could really change the trajectory of where you're going. And
100%.
I'm not saying that just because it's my book. I really mean this. And
Oh, yeah.
we're Enneagram threes. We don't say anything we don't mean.
100%. And we don't do nothing that we ain't about to crush. So we crush these books, okay?
I love you so much. Thank you, Tony, for
Love you.
taking the time to be on and speaking into my
Yay!
community and partnering with me in this life, this crazy, crazy life. I'm so glad I don't have to do this life without you in it.
Mhm.
It really is a delight to have you be one of my friends that I can pick up and just voice text. It could be a couple months, ain't nobody offended, and
Ain't
I will just
nobody
voice
been
text you, and I will be like, "Hey, I'm having
I'm
a
like, "Hey,
bad day."
girl, it's 2023 now. Hey."
Love that about our friendship. And I'm so thankful that I can be so honest with you, even if time has gone by, and you will hold my heart with honor
Mhm.
and gratitude. You will open up your heart to me. You are truly a testament of what it has meant to have a good and honest friend in the trenches. So thank you for linking arms with me. I'm a better human because you're in my life. So I love you. Thank you.
I love you
Take
too.
care. Take care of little Sammy because I know he's crazy right now. I know he's like, when
No. Sweet Sammy.
you
Love you, Carrie.
I will see you in a couple months because I'm gonna fly and hug you and hug that baby. Guys, get Free and Fully Alive and Brave Enough to Be Broken on Amazon. I love you so much. Thanks for being part of the podcast today. We'll see you next week.